Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Driven by DCKAP podcast. Really excited to do another series of Readers Are Leaders. In this series, we are going to be discussing the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I have with me Catherine Sulcus, who runs our Driven podcast. Catherine is an avid reader. Catherine, excited to have you join us for the Readers Are Leaders.
Thanks, Karthik. I'm really excited to talk to you about deep work. I thought it was a really well-written what, why, and how of deep work and the process of doing it. So to jump right in to start off our discussion, I'd like to start by asking what drew you to this book? Why did you want to read it?
Well, I would say the title of the book says deep work, and everybody likes to do deep work. I thought the title of the book was very fascinating. And I'm just trying to think who recommended this book to me. I mean, I really can't remember. Maybe, it was just talked about a few times. And then I thought, okay, you know what? I just got to get this and start reading. And that's how I got into reading deep work. What about you, Kathy? I mean, how did you get into deep work? How did you get into reading the book, Deep Work?
Yeah, well, I had seen the book in passing, but really after hearing you talk about it, really just solidified my wanting to read it. So I'm really glad to have gotten mainly the suggestion from you to read it as well. So I'm also curious, did you understand deep work, the concept of deep work before reading the book, or did that help you to understand it?
I would say after reading the book, I understood deep work better because the word deep work is so common, right? So when you get to listen to the word deep work, you think like, you know it. But then when you start reading it, it definitely gets you better insights. So it's essentially focused work with no distractions. That's what is written in the book. Yeah, focused work with no distractions is deep work. But I really enjoyed reading the book. Definitely, I would say it's after reading the book, I really understood Cal Newport's deep work.
Yeah, I think I had a bit of a vague understanding of it more than a detailed, understanding of it, which this brought out after reading the book. You need those moments of quiet, solitude. I used to do that a lot in college for, needing to sit down and write a research paper. So, it's a very helpful tool in a lot of ways. And there are also a lot of ways Newport suggests for getting into the habit of deep work, which I thought is really helpful as well. And what are some of the suggestions from the book that you found to be more easily applicable than others, perhaps?
One thing which resonated with me a lot is having a routine. He calls it the SMART routine. So wake up routine. I kind of follow it in a way in terms of, hey, what time are you getting up? So it's not like, right? See, sometimes I find a lot of people skipping breakfast or skipping lunch. They get so busy and things like that. But I can't really skip breakfast or skip lunch because once I start skipping it, I start having a headache and that ruins my day. So essentially, what Newport talks about is have a routine. Hey, get up at a certain time in the morning and plan your day ahead of time. And then what time are you going to have lunch? And then what time are you going to go to bed? So one thing which really resonated with me, and I started doing it after reading the book, is he says quit social media for 30 days and try it, but that's a different thing. But then at least what he asks us to do or he recommends is before you go to bed, do not check any email or do not check any social apps, let's say for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour. And that resonated with me a lot because, again, we make mistakes all the time. Sometimes right before I go to bed, I open YouTube, watch something, and then that's what really is in my brain when I go to sleep. And sometimes in my dream, I think about it, and that's not a good thing. So, I would say, hey, do not check social media prior to going to bed. I thought that was a big takeaway for me. What about you, Kathy? What was a big takeaway for you from the book?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think he sort of posed it as a test as well, right? If you can stay away from social media for 30 days and it not really negatively impact you, then maybe, that says something. You don't really need to continue a habit of doing that. And I think it's almost like a rerouting of the habits that you're making in your mind. So, having that kind of structured thought process of being able to find the focus for those moments of deep work certainly made it really helpful, I think, to me in understanding it. And even beyond having the right habits, I also thought it was really interesting. He brought up some of those more extreme ways that people would find the opportunity for deep work. J.K. Rowling, right, rented a castle in Edinburgh to find the quiet to write. I believe he said Alan Lightman went to a private island with no cell service to find those moments to write. Obviously, not all of us can do such an extreme process of finding the isolation or quiet for deep work, but it just really drives that point, right? That cultivating habits towards focus and concentration is necessary to enhance productivity. I think for me, planning your workday in advance was another one that I really took to. I think I already have certain to-do lists, but it spurred me to make it a much more efficient and a constant habit to make. So that was a couple of mine.
Yeah, and planning your work is interesting. And another thing I did take away from the book, which I thought was very interesting as well, is let's say you have a problem to solve. He suggests going for a walk. So one thing I've been doing recently is before I start my workday, I go for a walk. I kind of think through it, right? So you talked about planning your day. So let's say I'm going to start my work at whatever time, 8:30 or so, or let's say 7:30 or whatever time it is. I just try to go for a walk and try to think through, hey, what am I going to accomplish in the first half of the day? For the first 3 or 4 hours, I try to come up with 2 or 3 things. And that's really helped me a lot as well. Hey, just go for a walk, think through things, what you're going to accomplish. And then that really helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. And another interesting notion by Newport is how he talks about the difficulty of many of our environments, not being conducive to deep work. And he brings up the workplace, which I think is certainly interesting, especially for our dynamic. He argues there's a greater importance for quiet and isolation for the deep work efforts, rather than necessarily the wide open spaces that many offices have for teamwork and collaboration. And curious what you think. Do you think companies might be missing out on the greater contribution of deep work from employees rather than, putting them more in environments for teamwork?
Great question. One thing Newport writes in his book, and I can totally relate to this, is he talks about the Mong companies or the FANG companies, as it used to be called. Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And these companies, in a way, consumers. Hey, Google, hey, we are on YouTube. Meta, we are on Facebook or Instagram. Netflix, they really consume your time. But then he also writes that Mong companies or the FANG companies would not be FANG companies if they did not do deep work. So, which is so true. And collaboration is great in a workplace. And that's something Newport writes as well. So I love collaboration. It's awesome to work with people. But then when you're working on a problem, sometimes, it's just good to focus and maybe, even go out to another location. It doesn't have to be your office or it doesn't have to be your home office. Maybe you can go to a park and find some quiet place and just think through the problem or work on it. Yeah, so I do think it's very valuable. But one difficulty I do have, that's why I think conversations like this are very helpful, is I read the book, I practice deep work, and then I get sidetracked, and then I don't do deep work anymore. And then I really realize, hey, you know what? I got to get back into the rhythm. So in a way, this conversation is helpful because I have to refer to my notes in preparation to this podcast, and then I kind of relearn my learnings. It really helps because, hey, okay, tomorrow and for the next few weeks, I'm going to practice deep work again. And I find it really fascinating because especially in a work environment, you just can't grow big or you can't progress in your career. It's also very competitive. That's something Newport writes in his book. It's a very competitive environment. And the deep work which you do is going to be a big differentiator.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that deep work is a skill as well, right? It's not something that you can just do. You do need to create the habit and really understand what it is that you're doing in order to kind of execute that. So I think that's another sort of reinforced idea that Newport gives us out of that book as well. So yeah, that's an important one also. So did you have any favorite passage in particular or quote from the book?
Yeah, I've written it down. Let me check. think he quotes Tim Crader. Tim Crader says this: "I'm not busy, but I'm the laziest, ambitious person I know." I thought that was interesting because sometimes not doing anything is also a good thing. And, when you're lazy, you can also be creative. Again, it's rational thinking, but if you really think deep into it, it would make a lot of sense. So I thought that was very interesting. What about you? What favorite quote or passage did you enjoy the most from the book?
Yeah, I think, one of them that stood out to me was sometimes to go deep, you have to go big. He brings up, and that one just really jumped out at me because I think it also helps to let you know that, sometimes you have to make a rather big change or alteration in what you're doing, your schedule, your habits, in order to find those moments for deep work. It's not like you can just, turn off the computer and then immediately be able to go into the deep work, but that you have to really sort of shift in sometimes in a big way, right? I think he brought those up around the examples of Rowling renting the castle. Again, it may not be something like that for us to do, but maybe it's like you said, you go out to the park and you're walking, for an hour and just really focusing your mind on plans that you need to make and things like that. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that stood out to me, is to be able to make a bigger shift.
Yeah, and that's something I've not done either. Like maybe that's something I would like to experiment, right? Not a castle, but just go to a city where you have not gone and it's not so expensive, but then you can try to do deep work during the day. And then you also get to explore during the evenings or something like that. I think that'll be interesting. And a lot of people do that. And also, we find this often when we travel, we always go back energized. So yeah, it does make sense to get off the home and get to another place, a new environment. It really helps.
Yeah, and I think that idea of like a work trip does make some sense. I have even found that I've been able to find deeper focus a lot of times when I'm like away from the home setting and on a work trip like that too. So there is something about that, right? Where you're kind of taking yourself out of your normal environment and then being able to come back to it, maybe a bit more reinvigorated or able to focus more. Yeah, that's a good one. I think the second thing I think is really simply engaging in deep work and really important is that it's more difficult to achieve, right? It's like I said, you need that bigger shift, but that will be far more rewarded by finding the ways to do so. So I think in a lot of ways, for us to be able to find those moments, whether, closer to home or a little bit further away, it's worth doing, right?
Absolutely. And then when you work, there's obviously a lot of distractions. Let's say, you're trying to do deep work and you're thinking. One thing which really resonated with me is he says that there is a limit of how much deep work you can do during a day. Let's say if you're going to do deep work for 3 or 4 hours, and after that, you're going to have diminishing returns. So this is something I've found to be true, or it actually, I can totally resonate with that, because let's say, you do some really, really important work and you do deep work. And after that, I'm like, hey, you know what? I've done enough. I'm just going to relax a little bit. And so I thought that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, that stood out to me as well, where, when your work is done, be done, right? That's another point that he makes, because you need to be able to shift back away. So yeah, it's important to have the counter to the deep work moments. Give yourself a rest, I think. So
yeah, and that's something I've been practicing too, where, hey, you just work and then I'm done. Okay, I just close my laptop and I don't want to think about it anymore. And yeah, so in fact, I was reading a LinkedIn post today where I saw somebody post on LinkedIn that person was on a vacation, but then he also took his laptop with him. And that doesn't have to be that way if you really think about it. Some people really like to work during vacations as well. Maybe that's a different thing. But then, hey, if you're on a vacation, that's also deep work in a way, right? So enjoy the vacation and have fun there. And do not think too much about work. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the idea that he also brought forth, that you're kind of tapping out of your deep work ability if you're trying to do it too much, right? I think that's sort of what solidifies the idea of when you're done with work, be done, right? You need those steps away. So I think you're right. In a lot of ways, people try to do a lot of this, what they might think is deep work, in chunks constantly, but that's not really conducive to having the depth and the truly rewarding parts of deep work that Newport brings up. So yeah, another reason why I think this is just a really great book for most people to read, right? Would it be one of your recommendations?
Well, absolutely. I definitely recommend people to read this, especially people in the tech industry. You got to read this because we do a lot of work. We got to take care of our health and all that. But then health is important. But then if you're not able to do deep work, it's very hard to compete because you got to go deep in order to be differentiated from the market. So yeah, I highly recommend this book to anybody, especially people in the tech industry or in the knowledge economy, as we call it. People in the knowledge economy, everybody is a knowledge worker in a way, or a lot of people are knowledge workers. In this economy, to sustain and to differentiate, I would definitely recommend everybody reads this. And yeah.
I agree. I think it's great, especially for people who might struggle with certain tasks, writing, coding, even knitting. It's a good map, a good outline of that what, why, and how deep work can really help you perform at a high quality level. So,
and talking about tasks, one thing Newport does suggest is stack your meetings one after the other. I used to do this mistake in the past. Let's say I used to have a meeting on a Monday. I have it at 11:30 a.m. And then my next meeting is going to be on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. and Wednesday, something like that. Instead, stack all the meetings on the same day so you get some time off. So Mondays and Tuesdays, no meetings. Wednesdays and Thursdays is going to be my all meeting days, one after the other. So it does make you feel more productive. Would you agree?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of reward, not only mentally, but just in organization of your life, organizing, work, personal life. It can come into play in both aspects, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, but then if you are always doing deep work, how do you get distracted? What do you think?
Well, if you're doing deep work, I suppose the right way, the more proper way that Newport suggests, then you're a little bit more rigid, I guess, maybe in the ways and the areas that you're performing the deep work. So as long as you consciously find the moments to step back, consciously find the moments to engage in deep work, then I think that's when you'll be most successful.
Yeah, but then one more thing which Newport does add is set up distraction times. Let's say if you won't be distracted, and all of us can do deep work all the time. So sometimes, you set up a distraction time. Hey, what is my YouTube time for today? What time? Okay, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. or like 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. What is my YouTube time or what is my Instagram time? So he's asking us to set up distraction time. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, in the modern age we live in, I think it makes sense to do that for sure. I mean, we're even far past technology-wise where Newport was when he wrote this book. So it's even more pertinent to, I think, give in, as you say, like he suggests, to have those moments of distraction. It's just, again, going back to the discipline of knowing when you're maybe falling too much on that, right? When you know you need to pull yourself in and go back to finding your focus or do something to shift yourself to find that focus again.
That happens to me quite a lot. Let's say I'm doing really well and then there's a day where I get distracted and not during my distraction time, but the time I have for deep work. So that's why I've realized that scheduling your day in advance makes a lot of difference. So you know for sure what you're going to do that day. But let's say if I get onto a day without knowing what I'm going to do, then I'm bound to get distracted.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you don't plan, at least to some degree, you're definitely more susceptible to those distractions. Absolutely.
Another thing I want to ask you, Kathy, is let's say we go to a Chipotle or a Starbucks. You see a lot of people drinking coffee or eating a nice burrito, but then you also see them on their phone. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it just also speaks to, again, the age that we live in, how maybe we're not putting any kind of priority on like solitude and isolation, because I do think that's an important part of the deep work process, right? That we might be missing in larger chunks in modern society. We don't often isolate. And I think that is an important part of the deep work process as Newport talks about it. So even in those moments when you are maybe alone enjoying your coffee, like you said, at the Starbucks, we somehow still feel the need to pick up our phone and talk to someone, or, still find distractions, even in those very small moments, focus. And so that's maybe just speaks to the bad habits in all that modern society really breeds within us that we have to overcome.
And it's peer pressure as well. And you see people watching the phone and then immediately, hey, you know what, let me take my phone. But yeah, you're right. So you just got to be really, really cognizant of what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. And deep work is not just working, even your personal time, in a way, that's deep work as well, or however you call it.
Yeah, sometimes self-discipline is the hardest discipline, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I also found good, and I totally relate to this, is there's something called the good busy and the bad busy. So it's good to be busy in a good way. Sometimes I've done this mistake as well, where if I have nothing to do, I just ping randomly, hey, what do you think about this and what's happening there? But then the other person might be doing deep work. And so, yeah, I think it's also good to set some expectations. Let's say you send an email to somebody, do not expect them to respond immediately, or you send them a Slack message, and if they don't respond to you, don't get offended. So I thought these were interesting bits as well from the book.
I agree. It can be part of what you're cultivating in the workforce, right? So, we can have maybe a bit more of an expectation of, our employees are going to have moments of deep work. So you need to understand that immediate response isn't going to always be there, because we do have that practice in place, versus, the idea that you're always going to be connected to your Slack or your email and always be able to respond, because that's a different kind of workforce culture, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Kathy, it's been great discussing deep work with you. So if you have not checked out deep work, for those of you who have tuned in to this podcast, please do check out Deep Work, Cal Newport. It's an excellent book, especially needed in the knowledge economy. And again, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Kathy, for this great discussion. I really enjoyed the chat. And let's go do some deep work right now. And thank you all for joining. Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Driven Podcast. Check out our other episodes for more, and subscribe to be the first to access every new episode.